In this video, we are going to discuss renting a place in Toronto without a realtor and how to stay away from renters' traps and how to protect yourself against scams that could cost you thousands of dollars. Even though this video is based on my market, which is Toronto real estate market, you can generalize this video to other markets, high demand markets in Canada, such as Vancouver, Montreal, or Ottawa's real estate market. So in this video, we're going to talk about your rights and how to make your profile stand out, and if you face any competition, basically beat that competition when applying for rental properties. I'll break it down step by step. In this video, I'll cover the following topics and I will leave timestamps so you can go and watch each topic later again if you need to. So these are the topics that I'm gonna cover in this video. The first one is where to find the best rental listings beyond the usual sites that some of you may already know. And the second one is how to spot scams and avoid common renter traps. And believe me, there are lots of renter traps outside, unfortunately. So, and the third one is what landlords actually look for basically in tenants and how you can stand out. The fourth one is how to negotiate rent and lease terms in your favor. And the fifth one is legal must-knows, how to protect yourself before signing anything. The sixth one is how to fill and read basically the rental contract, lease contract, and what does that mean basically for you. You may ask, who am I to talk about these topics? For those of you who don't know me, I'm a real estate agent in Toronto, working with sellers, buyers, and landlords for over 9 years, and you may also have seen me on the global news discussing real estate market in Toronto. And just so you have an idea of the type of landlords that we service, you can see my rental listings on Realtor.ca, and you can see that it's ranging from $2,100 to $10,000 leases per month. So basically, now you know that I've been on every side of this business when we are dealing with landlords and tenants, and I know what I'm talking about. So basically, I can tell you, I know exactly how landlords think, and what I'm going to do in this video is that I'm going to help you to use that to your advantage. This guide is different because it is practical. I'm not here to sell you on a hype or buzzwords. I'm here to share the real, actionable information based on the actual and real world experience. Since the information in this video may be overwhelming, if at any part of this video you feel that you have questions on any of these information, use the link down below and book a discovery call with us to go through your questions. And in order to help us provide you with more content like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. So let's get started. Let's start with where to find rental listings. Most people start their rental search on websites online such as Facebook Marketplace and stuff like that. So, and while these platforms can be useful, they're also where you will find the most competition out there, the listing, and unfortunately some scams out there as well. So where should you actually be looking? Number one is that direct landlord websites and rental platforms. So these types of landlords, bigger landlords, in addition to their own websites, they sometimes use services such as, for example, Rentals.ca or PadMapper or Zumper, stuff like that. So those are also the secondary websites that these landlords might be posting their listings. Other than that, you can look at Facebook groups as well. What I highly suggest, if you are looking at this category of listings, look for professional listings from verified landlords and property management companies. So these are usually better maintained and come with clear basically lease agreements. So the second place is private landlord listings. So many landlords skip the big platforms entirely and list their rentals on places such as Kijiji or Craigslist, or if you're a student and looking for university housing or college housing, you can look at university or college housing boards. Another tip is that when dealing with private listings, always verify the ownership and never send money in advance to anyone. The third place is word of mouth and networking. So some of the rentals get filled through word of mouth, and I have examples that a few years back a tenant of ours referred the next person to us before she moved out. So we ran the credit check, etc., and it turned out to be a good landlord-tenant relationship. So tell your friends, ask your family or coworkers that you're looking, ask the building concierge if you're living in a building right now, if they know upcoming vacancies or your building next door or whatever. So you can ask people, ask around that you're looking to rent a place. So I'm sure somebody might know somebody or might know a place that is looking for a good tenant like you. On top of that, you can join local communities. For example, the neighborhoods usually have, for example, King West West neighborhood community or that neighborhood community. So you can join those local communities and check their postings as well. And a word of advice from me, some of the best deals come from referral. Number 4 is that walking around and looking for rent signs. So some landlords still go old school and put up the for rent signs in the window or the lobbies or on the front lawn of their properties. So you can walk around the neighborhoods that you're interested in and take notes of signs and pick up their phone numbers, give them a call and set up an appointment. So you can call building managements directly. They sometimes have vacancies that aren't online yet, but they know that those properties are coming in the next month or two. So if you call them, they might let you know in advance before they put those listings online. This method usually works for a smaller family-owned rental buildings with a slightly less units. So those are the buildings that they don't advertise wide. So the 5th one is using Realtor network databases. You can go on any of these websites that is IDX powered. IDX is basically internet data exchange, such as Realtor.ca, Listed, or this all kinds of apps that you see online. They are basically pulling data or information from a central database. So all of them have access. If you're using Real Estate or Realtor network, they all get data or listings from a specific pool and they share same listing. I will leave a couple of examples or maybe one example for you down in the description if you want to use some of the user-friendly apps that we use in our business. Now let's talk about how to spot and avoid rental scams that could cost you thousands of dollars. In Toronto's hot real estate market, and I'm sure Vancouver, Montreal, or Ottawa, probably the same story. In Toronto's hot real estate market, rental scams are more common than ever. Basically, the last thing that you want is to lose money to a fake listings or get stuck in a bad rental situation. So how do you spot scams and how common are renter traps? I don't want to scare you that much, but if you go browse online, you can see lots of these horror stories that has been covered by the news, CBC for example, in the past few years. I just don't want to basically scare you that much, but you can go look for this stuff online as well. First of all, how do we spot the scams? And next thing is that how to avoid these kind of scams. So the first one is that's pretty simple. If it looks too good to be true, believe me, it probably is. So scammers often list apartments at below market prices to lure in desperate renters. For example, if a listing seems way cheaper than similar units in the area, that's a red flag. That's not a deal. If it's too good to be true, it is. So a tip that I can give you is that always compare listings in the same neighborhood. So if one listing is way underpriced, be skeptical of that one. So the second way is that never send money before seeing the place. So legitimate landlords never ask you for deposits or first month rent or security deposit, blah blah, before you even see the unit in person. So if someone insists on an e-transfer or wire transfer or prepaid card or this and that before viewing a unit, it's almost certainly a scam. So the third one is verifying the landlord's identity and ownership. Some scammers pretend to be landlords and list properties that they don't own. So before signing anything, make sure you verify that who owns this property and also if the landlord actually has the right to rent the unit. For many tenants, that's an impossible task, I know, but for real estate agents, that's something that we do before putting a listing up for rent. So basically, before putting a listing up for rent, we verify the identity of the landlord and cross-check that with Ontario's land registry system to make sure this person is actual owner of that property and has the right to rent out this property. So the listing that comes from the Realtor network are safer because those realtors have identified those landlords and cross-check those names with the land registry system. Number 4 is that you should be beware of fake lease agreements. So some scammers use fake lease agreements to appear legitimate. Before signing, make sure you read every clause carefully, especially about deposits or maintenance and eviction policies and stuff like that. So second thing is that look for missing or vague landlord detail. And the last one is that be wary of non-refundable deposit before signing a lease. these aren't legal in many places. So further in this video, I'll put together a section on how to fill out a lease agreement, and if you want to rewatch that part of the video later, you can skip the rest of the video and go basically watch that part using the timestamps that I'm gonna put in this video. So the fifth way to counter those scams is avoiding high pressure tactics. So scammers or shady landlords, maybe some of them are not scammers, but they might be shady landlords out there that they actually really own a place, but they might be a little bit shady-ish, let's call it. So these kind of people often try to rush you into making a decision. If they say things like, you need to pay today or someone else is gonna get it, or no need for a lease, just send me the money and move in. Or let's say, for example, I don't have time for a viewing, just trust me, or stuff like that. So these are red flags. A real landlord, a professional landlord, will let you take your time to review everything properly and then make your decision and then sign a contract, send a deposit, stuff like that. Another tip that I can give you is that take your time. If they're pushing you or they're rushing you hard, it's probably scam, or if it's not a scam, it's a bad landlord that you don't want to deal with in the future. So the sixth way of countering those scams or avoiding those scams is that you need to check for fake or misleading photos. So some scammers steal photos from other listings or use stock images to make a unit look much nicer than it actually is. So what you need to do is that you need to go there or at least do a virtual tour on a FaceTime or video or something like that. So anyways, you are the person who is responsible to protecting you. Always remember that. So you need to know these and how to counter or avoid these scams. So by following these steps, you will protect yourself from scams and bad rental situations. Now let's move on to the next key step, how to stand out and actually secure the rental place that you were looking for. So finding a great rental is only half of the battle, and actually getting approved for it is when the most people struggle. So landlords get multiple applications when the market is hot. Of course, there are seasons. For example, in Toronto, there are seasons, let's say, for example, between November to February, that's a slower rental market. But let's say June, July, August are the time that the rental market is so heated up and you see lots of competition in the market. So it depends on the season as well. But let's say when the landlords get multiple offers, you need to make sure that you can stand out and get the place that you really want. The key in this situation is that you need to understand what landlords actually look for in a tenant. And 9 years working with landlords helped me to help you present yourself to secure the place that you really want. So these are the steps that would help you along the way. The first one is a strong and verifiable income. So what landlords are looking for is that they want a stable job or consistent income source. So monthly income that's at least 3 times the rent. Gross monthly income should be 3 times the rent. Of course, I've seen landlords that accepted 2 or 2.5 times, but mostly they're looking for at least 3 times the rent. On top of that, you need to make sure that you have documents to prove your employment and your income as well. So how to stand out? Have your income documents ready before applying. So this shows that you're prepared, and if you're self-employed, provide statements and tax returns to prove a steady income. Another tip is that if your income is slightly lower than a required income, consider getting a guarantor or a co-signer. That would be helpful in most cases. The second one is good credit history. So what landlords look for? Okay, I'm gonna cut that one. I'm not gonna go to the negative part, but let's say, for example, minimum 650 or 700 and above. That's the time that landlords are gonna look at your profile and feel a little bit more comfortable. If you have, like, let's say 800 or 780, 790, 800, 810 credit score, that's the time the landlord says, okay, I feel super confident about this application. What they look in your credit profile is that they're gonna look for late payments or bankruptcies or collections. They like to see a strong debt to income ratio as well. So in this case, how you can stand out? Check your credit report before applying. Use services such as Equifax, TransUnion, or Credit Karma. Nowadays, lots of banks also offer you some free credit check on your banking application. The thing is that if you're applying for a property, usually normally, like, professional landlords prefer Equifax or TransUnion, and I can tell you based on my experience, 90% of my landlord, basically clients, prefer Equifax because it's easier to read for professional landlords. So if your score isn't great, if, let's say, for example, you use one of those free services and check your score and your score isn't great, provide a letter from your employer or bank confirming your financial stability. So make sure you offer landlords something of value that the landlord feels that, okay, even though your score is low, but because of such and such and such, you have the ability to pay the rent and you're not gonna fall behind it. One tip for those of you who are new to Canada, because we have my team and I have helped many people who are new to Canada as well. So if you're new to the country and don't have a Canadian credit history, you can choose to provide proof of funds in, let's say for example, savings account to show your financial ability, or use a guarantor with a good credit history in Canada. So the third one is that landlords look for a stable rental history and references. So what does that mean? So landlords looking for a history of on-time rent payments, positive feedback from previous landlords, clear rental records with no eviction or disputes. So how to stand out in this case? In my opinion, you need to have your landlord references ready. So ask your previous landlords for a letter of recommendation confirming that you were a reliable tenant, you paid rent on time, and you were good, blah blah blah. And if you had past rental issues, in my opinion, you should be upfront about your past rental issues and explain how you improved. The fourth one is professionalism and responsiveness. So what does the landlord look for in this case? The landlords look for tenants who respond quickly and communicate well. The tenants that have a respectful and professional attitude. So how you stand out in this case? You need to respond promptly to messages, and again, it's not mandatory, it's not gonna hurt anybody, but in my opinion, when you go for a showing or for a viewing, don't look at it like a chore. Dress professionally. If you're going to meet the landlord in person, believe me, that's gonna help a lot. People may overlook that or may say, oh no, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna just go look at the property. But if the landlord is there and there are 5 other people applying for this unit, believe me, it matters. Yeah, if let's say for example, the neighborhood is a far away neighborhood, it's in the middle of winter and there are not many tenants out there looking at the properties. But if it's in the middle of summer, you're looking, let's say for example, you're looking at the places like next to the University of Toronto or downtown core in Toronto. For each unit, there are 5 applications waiting to get that into that unit. If you're meeting a landlord, in my opinion, dress professionally and present yourself professionally. It will help to make a strong first impression. And another tip, the landlords want a tenant who is easy to work with. So if you are friendly, organized and professional, you are already ahead of most applicants. So final strategy, make a renter's resume. This is not mandatory, but if you're stuck in a high competitive market or your income is not as good enough, you need to present other stuff to the landlord that, hey, I'm a great tenant, I'm gonna take care of your property, let's work together and get this rental application approved. In your renter's resume, you can put your employment and income details, credit score screenshot and rental history, and your past references from, let's say for example, your past colleagues or past supervisor at work or past landlords. And you can write a little bit, like a few lines, short personal introduction about yourself and stuff like that. That would also help in those competitive markets. Again, it's seasonal. Your market may not be as competitive as the, let's say for example, downtown Toronto in the summer markets. So these steps may not apply to you, but I'm putting out this video out there for everybody who's looking to rent a place to be successfully basically achieving their goals when it comes to securing a place for themselves or their family. So literally by understanding what landlords actually care about and preparing ahead of time, you will put yourself in the best position. So now let's talk about how to negotiate your lease and get the best possible deal. Isn't that nice? So most people don't realize that rent prices and lease terms are often negotiable. Often. Pay attention to that word, often. It depends on your market, the seasonality, the time of the year, and like lots of other stuff. They're often negotiable, especially if you're in the right market condition. But if you don't ask, you won't get a better deal. So how do you negotiate effectively and get the best possible terms and lease price? So here's a step-by-step strategy for you new tenants to how to negotiate lease while staying professional and realistic, of course. The first step is that you need to know the market before you negotiate. Why does it matter? Landlords set rents based on demand. So if you want leverage, you need to know whether the prices in your area are rising or falling. So how you do it? Check the rental listings on, let's say for example, different apps that you have out there. Again, I will leave a link to one of the apps that I use. It's user-friendly in the description. You can use that one or you can use any other apps. It really doesn't matter for me. I'm not getting paid by those stuff. So it's just to help you. So you can go to any of those apps and check the history and compare the prices for similar units in the neighborhood. Now you look for units that have been sitting on the market for weeks, and this means the landlord of those units, basically those landlords, might be open to lowering the prices for you if you negotiate pretty good. Of course, it depends on your profile as well. If you have a bad profile and you try to negotiate, it's no. So you go to those apps, research the market, see what's on the market, sitting on the market for a while, and what are the prices, similar properties, how much they list for, how much they basically rented for, and you get those information. And if the rental demand is high, you may have less room to negotiate, so realistically. The second thing is that when it comes to negotiation is that timing. So you need to know when to negotiate. The best time to negotiate a rental deal is at the end of the month, when the landlords are more in need or desperate to fill their vacant homes. So off-season, for example, in Toronto, off-season is between November till February. That's the kind of the time that the rental market is lagging behind and landlords are hurting between those times. But when we get to, let's say, June, July, August, most part of Toronto, you can't negotiate. You even have to basically even overbid others in order to secure a place. I'm not going to go there at this point, but let's say if you're off season, you can have leverage to negotiate as well. So timing is really important. Number 3 is that start by negotiating the rent, but do it smartly. So you might ask how to lower the rent. So first of all, be polite but firm. Ask if there's flexibility on the price, especially if the unit has been sitting on the market for, let's say, 4 or 5 weeks or so, or let's say for a month. Then offer to sign a longer term lease. For example, offer 18 months instead of 12 months in exchange for lower monthly rent. Let me give you an example script on this. Let's say, for example, you go there, you see, oh, okay, Mr. or Mrs. Landlord, I really like this unit, but I've seen similar listings in the area going for about, let's say, $100 less than what you listed it. So would you be open to adjusting the rent, or is there any flexibility on price? Look, you need to convey that information professionally. You don't demand in a rude manner. You're not dealing with AI and stuff. You're dealing with humans. So part of negotiation is that you make them at least like you a little bit if they want to think about giving you a discount or a deal on the lease. So even if they don't lower the rent, you can still negotiate for better lease terms. For example, you can ask them, hey, I need, let's say, for example, parking spot in this location, or I need utilities included, or stuff like that. So you can still negotiate. It's not always about the lease price itself, but sometimes, even though you can't get a lease, for example, price that you want, but you can get, for example, a better parking spot in the P1 or something like that, something that has a little bit value to you, but not gonna hurt the landlord because the landlord is already paying overhead for a bunch of other stuff. It's not gonna hurt them, but if they like you, they're gonna give you things for free. So number 4 is that always get everything in writing. So why is that crucial? A verbal agreement means nothing if it's not in the lease. If you have negotiated a lower rent, for example, free parking or utilities included, make sure it is written in the lease before signing it. As another tip, if the landlord agrees to something but doesn't update the lease, politely ask them to add it to the lease. If they refuse, that's a red flag. Please remember, negotiation isn't about demanding, it's about creating a win-win situation. So if you show that you are a serious, reliable tenant, landlords are more likely to work with you. Now that you know how to negotiate, let's move on to the next step: how to review your lease agreement before signing and know your rights. I'll go through the lease contract itself and how it must be properly filled in the next section. But before that, let me tell you about the rights and what to watch before signing a lease agreement. So these are the legal must-knows to protect yourself before signing anything. Before you sign a lease agreement, you need to know exactly what you're agreeing to, because once that contract is signed, you're legally bound to it. Too many renters overlook key details and end up dealing with unexpected costs and or bad landlords in the future. The first thing you need to know is that you need to know, or you need to read the entire lease. Every clause matters. Make sure you read all those clauses. So why is it important? A lease is a legally binding contract. If there's a clause in there that you don't like or don't understand, it may or can or may not cause problems down the road. So things to look for in a lease are, let's say, rent amount and due dates and security deposit, lease term, utilities and maintenance, rules on guests or subletting or pets. These are the sorts of stuff that basically you need to pay attention to. So if a landlord promises something verbally, like for example free parking or basically utilities are included, make sure it's written in the lease, because if it's not, it won't hold up legally. The second one is watch out for illegal or unfair lease terms. So some landlords include illegal stuff or unenforceable terms in leases, hoping tenants won't notice those. So common illegal lease clause, again, it depends on your area. If you're, let's say, in Vancouver, illegal stuff might be different stuff. So for example, some of the terms that are legal in Quebec are not legal in Toronto, or vice versa, or in Ontario. I mean, common illegal lease clauses can be, you must waive your right to a legal eviction notice, for example. A landlord cannot override tenants' rights, just so you know. It's a contract law. So basically, law always supersedes the contract. So if something is illegal and it's written in the contract, it's not enforceable because law always supersedes the contract that you sign. Another thing is that some clauses such as no guests are allowed or no pets are allowed. Of course, landlords can set reasonable guest policies, for example, number of guests and noise policies and stuff like that, especially if you're in a condo. For example, in Ontario, they cannot say you cannot have a pet. It's not legal. But there might be restrictions. So for example, some of the condo buildings, they have restrictions on the size of the pet or number of the pets for each unit. So there can be restrictions, but they cannot say, hey, there are no pets. Other clauses are, for example, tenants are responsible for all repairs or no security deposit refund under any circumstances, situations like that. Again, it depends on the area. I'm not gonna go into the details about it. At the beginning of the video, I told you, if you have any questions, you can book a discovery call using the link down in the descriptions of this video. And we can set up a meeting and talk to you about those questions. So how to handle this? If you see something questionable, ask the landlord for clarification. If a clause is illegal, point it out and ask for it to be removed before signing that contract. If the landlord refuses to accommodate that, in my opinion, you should walk away, because this is a red flag and it can cause future problems. Another pro tip is that if you're unsure about something in the leases or in the basic lease contract, consult a local tenant board. Let's say, for example, here we have a landlord tenant board. Their phone number is online. You can give them a call, or a paralegal or a lawyer, or basically a rental advocacy group before signing that lease. The third one is you need to clarify the lease break policies. So because once you sign a contract, you're bound to it. You need to know how you can break that one, or what are the policies around subletting or subleasing that contract. There might be penalties involved with breaking the lease prematurely, early termination fees, notice requirements, how many days in advance you need to give a notice to the landlord, or what are the subletting options, can you sublet this lease, and what are the options on that. So if a lease doesn't mention a lease break policy, ask for it before signing that. So the fourth one is get everything in writing. Verbal agreement don't hold up in court. So if something isn't in writing, it doesn't exist legally. Now that you know how to protect yourself legally, let's move on to the final step, how to read and fill a rental contract. For this, I'm gonna take you to the screen and we are gonna go through my screen. All right, let's go to my screen and go through this lease together. So it's a residential tenancy agreement, a standard form of lease. Remember, this is a mandatory lease in the province of Ontario that you need to sign if you are getting into a residential lease. This form is pretty straightforward. They have all the information at the end of the form that you can read as well. So I'm going to go through that quickly and tell you about the most important stuff that you need to know. So first of all, landlord name is going to be here, tenant's name here, rental unit. It's a basement unit. If it's a basement unit, write it down, or unit number, let's say for example 2122 or something, street number, street name, city, town, promise. You fill out the address over there, number of vehicle parking. So for example, if it's a underground parking, you'd write it down. So for example, underground parking spot number, whatever. You can say it's a driveway parking or shared driveway, whatever it is, you write it down. If it's the rental unit inside the condominium or not, it's a condo apartment basically or rental building, you just check these respective squares here. The second page is the address for giving notice or documents to the landlord. This part the landlord has to fill out, and there is one section underneath that it says that both the landlord and tenant can agree to send and receive notices via an email. So you can put your email over there, the landlord can put their email address over there, and you can basically have much easier communication instead of sending letters and envelopes to your door. And believe me, before it used to be like that, and I was always laughing at it. Even though like by law it was mandatory, and in some cases some of the notices actually by law are mandatory right now, but your normal day-to-day stuff, or let's say for example notice, let's say N11 you're signing stuff like that, you can send it through the email. But some of the notices still require the landlord and tenant to send the actual physical envelopes to the, for example, landlord needs to send that envelope to the tenant's door in an envelope, in a paper copy, or stick it at the tenant's door. So there are still some parts of the law that require those old school notices, which you don't need to know at this point unless you get into a dispute or something goes wrong in the future. Other than that, don't bother yourself about that stuff. So just click this as a yes and put your email address and ask the landlord to put their email address. Don't worry about the rest for now. This section underneath is that the landlord is providing you an email or phone number to be in touch with the landlord. So the number 4 here, term of tenancy agreement. For example, if your start date is 1st of February 2025, for example, your last day of tenancy is 31st of January 2026, if it's a 1-year tenancy. So you're gonna check here, put a check mark here. It's a fixed length of time ending on 31st of January 2026. And what will happen after that is here. The tenant does not have to move out at the end of the term. See parts C and D in the general information at the end of this form. So basically, you don't need to move out after your 1-year lease. Automatically, your lease goes on a month-to-month tenancy. Okay, so after that, we are gonna go to section 5, which is rent. For example, if you start your lease term at the 1st of the month, you're gonna write here 1st of the month. So if you start your rent at, let's say for the middle of the month, 15th of the month, for example, you're gonna start your rent from 15th of February, you're gonna write 15 down here, and then you check here in the month, because your rent is going to be monthly. So the tenant will pay the following rent. You put your rent amount here, which is the base rent for the unit. If parking is included, just leave it blank. Other services and utilities, blah, blah. Or if you pay parking separately, you can also rent parking here. But if it's included in the rent, it's written that it's included in the rent, you don't need to fill it up here. So in the total rent, for example, you rent a place for $2,400 a month. The total rent, you also write $2,400 a month, and because you're not going to use any other services. Let's go to the next page. So you can read through it. I'm going to go through that pretty quickly. The rent is payable to. Here you write down the name of the landlord, the name of the person that you are paying the rent to. Rent will be paid using the following methods. It's optional. You can choose to give the rent using posted checks, but it's not mandatory. You can choose to use, for example, email transfer. It's totally up to you. The decision on that lies between you and the landlord, how you basically agree on that. So the next one goes, if the rental period is a partial period, blah, blah. Normally you just leave it blank because it's gonna make it complicated. You don't need to know about it right now. I'm not gonna complicate this video and go through all those examples and stuff. So if the tenant check is bounced back, you're gonna have a charge which law limits that charge to $20. So services and utilities, if the gas is basically provided, air conditioning, additional storage space or locker, guest parking, on-site laundry, for example. If it's the unit has an in-suite laundry, you have to check this one here. If it has air conditioning, you check this one here. If it has like gas stuff, you check this here. And the next one, and you're going to the next page. This part is the place that shows who is paying for what. So if the landlord is paying for electricity, it's checking here. If the tenant is paying, checking here. Same applies to heat, water, and internet if, for example, you want to pay the internet here. Number 7 is rent discounts. Most of the times, I can tell you 99% of the time, you just check there's no rent discount. Go to the next one. Rent deposit. Rent deposit, remember, you pay first and last, for example, when you want to rent a place. But the rent deposit is only the last month rent. So when you want to fill it up here, for example, for a $2,400 condo, that you rented, you pay first and last of $4,800, but that $4,800 is not the deposit. The deposit is $2,400, which is the last month rent. The $2,400 for the first month rent is basically your rent for the first month that you pay to go and stay or basically move into the property. So number 9, key deposit. Key deposit, it has to be similar to a replacement cost of the keys. So you talked to the landlord about that because each property might have different kinds of keys or fobs or remote controls, so different prices. Number 10 is smoking. Most properties, I can tell you, smoking is not allowed inside the premises or inside the unit. And lots of properties, for example, some of the condos downtown that we work here, they don't allow basically smoking even in the balcony, some of them, or for example vaping or other kinds of smoking. All of the properties have limitations on smoking. So basically they have smoking rules, and most of them are no smoking inside the premises. Number 11 here is tenant insurance. Most of the professional landlords ask you to have a tenant insurance in case anything happens. It covers liabilities and content. So for example, if there's a flooding or fire or something happening, your content is insured, and you have also liability insurance as well, which creates a shield for you and both you and landlord. Number 12, changes to the rental unit. You can read that yourself. 13, 14, 15. Okay, number 15. Normally in the rental agreements, there's a schedule or there's an attachment that you agree on some terms separately. For example, if you're doing the basic rental contracts through different channel, you have a set of rules or clauses that can be attached to this agreement. In that case, you're gonna check here this part, and meaning that there's an attachment with additional terms that both you and the landlord agreed on. So the last page that you need to read and sign is the signature page. You put your name, landlord's name, signature, date is here, and this is your name, signature, and date. And the rest of the form you can go on your own. It has really useful information for the tenants, and I suggest you read it all. So at the end, if you choose not to use the services of Realtor and go through the hoops and loops to rent a place, this video guide is all you needed to know in order to rent a place on your own. On the other hand, if you choose to use the services of a Realtor to rent a place, for example, one of my colleagues or team members who help hundreds of tenants in Toronto, you can make sure that you're in good hands. Someone explains basically the process and paperwork along the process. So a Realtor can advise you if a property is priced well and tell you about the market conditions and fair market value of rental property, which basically all these steps that we did together in this video, and you need to be prepared for it. A professional Realtor can help you with all those steps and do that for you. So on top of that, the Realtor network landlords are identified. This is very important. I mean, in order to prevent the scams and basically those traps that tenants face. The Realtor network landlords are identified, and the deposit that goes towards your first and last month will be held in a trust account in a real estate brokerage and will not be released to the landlord until the landlord hands over the keys to you. So basically we call that actual closing. And until that time, the brokerage, the money from the brokerage trust account is not gonna move to the landlord and stays in the brokerage trust account, and your money, your deposit, is protected in a trust account, in a third-party trust account, and brokerages provide all these services to the landlords and tenants. And remember, in Toronto, in almost all the cases, the landlords pay the realtors, so the tenants don't pay the realtors and get that service for free unless otherwise agreed between you and your realtor that you pay the realtor a fee for the services. Other than that, your realtor gets paid from the landlord, and it does not have any cost for you to work with one.